One night, one drink, one kiss, with a man who didn't actually exist. The rain drummed against the windows of Murphy's pub like impatient fingers, each drop echoing the restless beat of Sarah Chen's heart. She sat at the far end of the mahogany bar, her fingers wrapped around a glass of whiskey she hadn't touched in 20 minutes. The amber liquid caught the dim light from the vintage Edison bulbs hanging overhead, creating tiny golden pools that reminded her of the tears she'd shed earlier that evening. At 28, Sarah had learned that life rarely went according to plan. But tonight felt different. Tonight felt like the universe was actively conspiring against her. The termination letter from Hartwell and Associates still burned in her memory, every word etched with the cold precision of corporate indifference. Due to budget constraints and restructuring, your position as marketing coordinator has been eliminated, effective immediately. 5 years of 60-hour weeks, missed dinners, and sacrificed weekends, all culminating in a security guard escorting her from the building with a cardboard box of personal belongings. The worst part wasn't even losing the job. It was the look of pity in her colleagues' eyes as she walked past their cubicles for the last time. If you're enjoying this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more amazing tales like this one. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. I'd love to hear from you. The pub's atmosphere wrapped around her like a familiar blanket. Murphy's had been her refuge since college, a place where she could disappear into the crowd of after-work professionals and graduate students from nearby Northwestern University. Tonight, however, the usual comfort felt hollow. Even the familiar scent of beer, aged wood, and the faint aroma of the kitchen's famous shepherd's pie couldn't lift her spirits. Rough day? The voice came from her left, smooth and unexpectedly warm. Sarah glanced over and felt her breath catch. The man sitting 2 stools away looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine, not the glossy, artificial kind, but something more authentic. Maybe a travel journal about interesting people you meet in small towns. His dark hair was slightly tousled, as if he'd been running his hands through it, and his blue eyes held a depth that suggested he understood something about difficult days. He wore a simple white button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms that spoke of actual work rather than just gym sessions. Is it that obvious? Sarah managed, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. He smiled, and the expression transformed his entire face. Let's see. You've been staring at that drink like it holds the secrets of the universe. You've checked your phone exactly 17 times in the past 10 minutes. And you're sitting in a pub on a Tuesday night in Chicago looking like someone just told you Santa Claus isn't real. Despite everything, Sarah found herself laughing. Santa Claus isn't real? I probably should have led with something less devastating. He extended his hand. I'm Jake, by the way, Jake Morrison. Sarah Chen. His handshake was firm but gentle, the kind that suggested confidence without arrogance. And yes, it's been a particularly spectacular day, in the worst possible way. Jake signaled the bartender, a grizzled man named Tommy, who'd been working at Murphy's since before Sarah was born. Another round for the lady, and I'll take whatever she's having. You don't have to. Consider it an investment in good karma, Jake said. Besides, misery loves company, and I happen to be excellent company when I'm miserable. There was something about his manner that put Sarah at ease. He wasn't trying too hard, wasn't using the polished lines she'd heard from countless men in bars. There was an authenticity to him that felt rare in a city where everyone seemed to be performing a version of themselves. So, what's your story? Sarah asked as Tommy placed fresh drinks in front of them. What brings you to Murphy's on a Tuesday night? Jake's expression grew thoughtful. Would you believe me if I said I was just walking by and the rain drove me inside? In this city? Absolutely, but that's not the whole truth, is it? He raised his glass in a small salute. To perceptive strangers in dimly lit pubs. They drank, and Sarah felt the whiskey burn warm down her throat. She wasn't much of a drinker, but tonight called for exceptions. I had a meeting downtown, Jake said finally. It didn't go well. Actually, it went catastrophically. Sometimes you think you know people, think you can trust them, and then you discover that everything you believed was built on quicksand. Business or personal? Both. Unfortunately, when you work in family business, the lines get blurred. He paused, studying his drink. What about you? What turned your Tuesday into a day that requires quality whiskey? Sarah found herself telling him everything. About Hartwell and Associates. About the 5 years she'd poured into a job that had ultimately meant nothing to the people making decisions. About her tiny apartment in Logan Square that she might not be able to afford much longer. And about the growing fear that she was somehow fundamentally flawed in a way that made her disposable. Jake listened without interruption, without offering the hollow reassurances that most people felt compelled to give. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. You know what I think, he said finally. What? I think Hartwell and Associates just made the biggest mistake of their corporate lives, and I think you're going to look back on this night as the beginning of something much better. How can you possibly know that? Jake turned to face her fully, and in the warm light of the pub, his eyes looked almost golden. Because I can see it in you. The way you talk about your work, even when you're angry about losing it, there's passion there, real passion. That doesn't just disappear because some suit decides to eliminate your position. The conversation flowed as naturally as the rain outside. They talked about everything and nothing. Sarah's love of vintage bookstores. Jake's confession that he couldn't cook anything more complex than scrambled eggs. Their shared opinion that Chicago deep dish pizza was more casserole than pizza, but delicious nonetheless. Time seemed to slow and stretch, each moment feeling both fleeting and eternal. Can I tell you something? Sarah said as they finished their second round. The alcohol had loosened something inside her. Some tight knot of control she'd been carrying for months. Anything. I haven't felt this comfortable talking to someone in a really long time. Usually I'm so busy trying to be the person I think people want me to be that I forget who I actually am. Jake's expression grew serious. And who are you, Sarah Chen? The question hung between them, heavy with possibility. Sarah realized she didn't have a ready answer. Not because she didn't know, but because she'd been hiding it for so long. I'm someone who believes stories have power, she said slowly. I'm someone who thinks the right words can change everything, can make people feel less alone in the world. I'm someone who's been so focused on climbing ladders that I forgot to check if they were leaning against the right wall. That's beautiful, Jake said softly. Their eyes met, and something electric passed between them. Sarah felt her cheeks warm, and not from the whiskey. Dance with me, Jake said suddenly. Sarah glanced around the pub. There was no dance floor, just the narrow space between the bar and the tables. An old Norah Jones song played from the sound system, soft and bluesy. Here? Why not here? Before she could think of all the reasons why not, Jake was standing, offering his hand. Sarah looked at it for a moment. This hand attached to this man who felt like a gift the universe had wrapped in rain and candlelight and placed in her path on the worst day she'd had in years. She took his hand. They moved to the small space between the bar and a table of college students who were too absorbed in their own drama to pay attention. Jake pulled her close, one hand settling at the small of her back, the other holding her hand gently. They swayed more than danced, finding a rhythm that was entirely their own. Sarah closed her eyes and let herself exist in the moment. Jake smelled like rain and something uniquely him, clean and warm and mysteriously comforting. His body was solid against hers, steady in a way that made her feel anchored for the first time in months. This is crazy, she whispered against his shoulder. The best things usually are. When the song ended, they didn't immediately separate. Sarah lifted her head to look at him and found his face inches from hers. His eyes searched her face as if he was memorizing it, and she did the same, cataloging the small scar above his left eyebrow, the way his lips curved slightly upward, even in repose, the tiny lines around his eyes that spoke of laughter. Sarah, he said, her name a question and a prayer. She answered by rising on her toes, closing the distance between them. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, as if they were both afraid of breaking something precious. Then it deepened, becoming something more urgent, more necessary. Sarah felt her world tilt and resettle around this new axis, this moment that felt both impossible and inevitable. When they finally broke apart, both breathing unsteadily, Jake rested his forehead against hers. "I should probably tell you," he said quietly, "that I don't usually do this. Kiss strangers in pubs? Kiss anyone who makes me forget my own name." Sarah's heart did something acrobatic in her chest. Did I do that? Completely. They returned to their seats, but everything had changed. The air between them hummed with new possibility, with the recognition of something rare and precious. They talked for another hour, sharing stories and dreams and fears with the kind of openness that usually took months to develop. "I should go," Sarah said finally, glancing at her phone. It was nearly midnight, and tomorrow would bring the harsh reality of job hunting and bill paying. "Let me walk you to your car," Jake offered. "I took the L. Murphy's as just a few blocks from the station. Then let me walk you to the station." They gathered their things and stepped out into the Chicago night. The rain had softened to a gentle mist that caught the streetlight like tiny diamonds. They walked slowly, neither wanting the evening to end. "I had a really wonderful time tonight," Sarah said as they approached the entrance to the Blue Line station. "So did I. More wonderful than I knew was possible." They stood facing each other under the yellow glow of the station's lights, people flowing around them like water around stones. "Will I see you again?" Jake asked, and there was vulnerability in his voice that made Sarah's chest tight. "I'd like that, very much." They exchanged numbers, fingers brushing as Jake handed her phone back to her. The simple touch sent warmth shooting up her arm. "Good night, Sarah Chen." "Good night, Jake Morrison." This time she kissed him, standing on tiptoe to press her lips to his one more time. It was brief but perfect, a promise of more to come. Sarah descended the stairs to the train platform, her heart singing in a way it hadn't in years. She turned at the bottom to wave goodbye, but Jake had already disappeared into the Chicago night, leaving her with nothing but the memory of blue eyes and the lingering warmth of his kiss. On the train ride home to Logan Square, Sarah replayed every moment of the evening. The conversation, the dance, the kiss that had felt like coming home and setting sail simultaneously. She found herself smiling at her reflection in the dark train window, feeling lighter than she had in months. Her phone buzzed with a text. "Thank you for the most perfect evening. Sweet dreams, Sarah." She typed back, "Thank you for reminding me that magic still exists. Sleep well, Jake." That night, Sarah fell asleep with Jake's business card on her nightstand, and hope blooming in her chest like spring flowers after a long winter. She woke the next morning to sunlight streaming through her bedroom window, and the memory of the previous night feeling like a beautiful dream. But Jake's number was still in her phone, and his text was still there to prove it had all been real. Sarah spent the morning updating her resume and searching job boards, but her heart wasn't in it. She kept thinking about Jake's hands, about the way he'd listened to her without trying to fix everything, about the ease with which they'd talked and laughed and connected. Around noon, her phone rang. Unknown number. "Sarah, it's Jake." Her heart did that acrobatic thing again. "Hi, I hope it's okay that I'm calling. I couldn't stop thinking about last night." "It's more than okay. I've been thinking about it too." "Good thinking or, oh my God, what did I do thinking?" Sarah laughed. "Definitely good thinking." "Thank God. Listen, I know this is short notice, but would you like to have lunch? There's this little cafe in Lincoln Park that makes the best grilled cheese sandwiches in the city." "I love grilled cheese." "Perfect. Cafe Selmery on Lincoln Avenue. Say 1 o'clock? I'll be there." Sarah hung up and immediately panicked about what to wear. After trying on half her closet, she settled on a simple blue dress that brought out her eyes and made her feel confident without trying too hard. Cafe Selmery was exactly the kind of place Sarah loved, warm and welcoming, with exposed brick walls covered in local artwork and the rich aroma of coffee and fresh bread filling the air. She spotted Jake immediately, sitting at a small table by the window, and her breath caught again at how handsome he was in daylight. He stood when he saw her, and the smile that spread across his face was like sunrise. "You came," he said, as if he'd been half convinced she wouldn't. Wild horses couldn't have kept me away. They ordered grilled cheese and tomato soup, comfort food that seemed perfect for a gray Chicago afternoon. The conversation picked up exactly where it had left off the night before, as if they'd been talking for years instead of hours. "Tell me about your family," Sarah said as they waited for their food. Something flickered across Jake's expression, too quick for her to interpret. "Not much to tell. My parents died when I was young, car accident. I was raised by my grandfather." "I'm sorry. That must have been incredibly hard." "It was. But my grandfather was an amazing man. He taught me everything important, how to work with my hands, how to treat people with respect, how to find joy in simple things." Jake's voice grew warm. "He had this workshop in his garage where he restored old furniture. I spent every weekend there, learning how to sand and stain and bring beautiful things back to life." "That sounds wonderful. Is he still—" "He passed away 2 years ago. Left me everything, including the family business." Jake's smile turned sad. "I'm still trying to figure out how to honor his legacy while making it my own." Their food arrived, and Sarah noticed how Jake thanked the waitress by name, how he seemed to know half the staff. There was something about his manner that suggested he was a regular here, but also that he treated everyone with the same genuine warmth he'd shown her. "What about you?" Jake asked. "Family. My parents immigrated from Taiwan when I was 3. They own a small restaurant in Chinatown, Chen's Garden. My dad is an incredible cook, and my mom has a gift for making everyone who walks in feel like family." Sarah's expression grew complicated. "They're wonderful people, but they worry about me constantly. They think I should have settled down years ago, given them grandchildren to spoil. And what do you think? I think I've been so focused on building a career that I forgot to build a life. Last night was the first time in months that I felt like myself instead of just a resume walking around in heels." Jake reached across the table and covered her hand with his. The touch sent familiar warmth shooting through her. "I'm glad I could be part of that." They lingered over lunch for 2 hours, reluctant to return to the real world. When they finally left, Jake walked her to the bus stop. "I had a wonderful time," Sarah said. "Again. This is getting to be a habit, a very good habit." Jake hesitated, as if debating whether to say something. "Sarah, there's something I should probably tell you." A bus pulled up, doors opening with a hydraulic hiss. "My bus," Sarah said apologetically. "But call me tonight. We can talk about whatever you were going to say." "Of course, tonight." She kissed him goodbye, quick and sweet, then climbed onto the bus. Through the window, she watched Jake standing on the sidewalk until the bus turned the corner, and he disappeared from view. That evening, Jake called as promised. They talked for 3 hours about everything and nothing. Childhood memories, favorite books, dreams for the future. Sarah found herself opening up in ways that surprised her, sharing fears and hopes she'd never voiced aloud. "I should let you go," Jake said finally. "It's late." "I don't want to hang up." "Neither do I, but I have an early meeting tomorrow and you need to job hunt." "Real life is highly overrated," Jake laughed. "Agreed, but it's not going anywhere. Unlike us, we're going somewhere interesting, aren't we?" "Yes," Sarah said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "I think we are." They fell into a routine over the next few days. Jake would call in the morning while Sarah was having coffee, and they'd talk until one of them had to leave for meetings or interviews. He'd text throughout the day, funny observations, photos of interesting architecture he'd spotted, questions about her preferences in everything from ice cream flavors to music genres. On Friday, Jake suggested they meet for dinner. "There's this little Italian place in Little Italy that my grandfather used to take me to. I'd love to share it with you." Nonna's Kitchen was the kind of restaurant that felt like stepping into someone's home. Red checkered tablecloths, candles in old wine bottles, and the most incredible aromas Sarah had ever encountered. The owner, an elderly woman named Mrs. Rossi, greeted Jake with enthusiastic Italian and cheek kisses. "She says you're too skinny and need more pasta," Jake translated as Mrs. Rossi bustled away. "I like her already." The dinner was magical. They shared plates of homemade pasta, drank wine that tasted like sunshine, and talked until they were the last customers in the restaurant. Mrs. Rossi brought them complimentary tiramisu and more wine, then retreated to give them privacy. "I have a confession," Jake said as they shared the dessert. "I've been looking forward to tonight all week." "Just tonight?" "Every moment I get to spend with you. You've become the best part of my days, Sarah." The words hung between them, loaded with meaning. Sarah felt her cheeks warm. "You've become the best part of mine, too." They walked slowly back to Sarah's apartment, hands linked, neither wanting the evening to end. The city lights reflected off the pavement, and somewhere in the distance, music drifted from an open window. "This is me," Sarah said as they stopped in front of her building, a converted brownstone that had seen better days, but still retained its Chicago charm. "Nice neighborhood." "It's not much, but it's home." Sarah turned to face him. "Would you like to come up? I make surprisingly good coffee for someone who was recently unemployed." Jake's eyes searched her face. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." Sarah's apartment was small but cozy, filled with books and plants and photographs that told the story of a life well lived. Jake examined her bookshelf while she made coffee, noting the eclectic mix of genres. "You have interesting taste in books," he called from the living room. "Thanks, I'm a firm believer that you can learn something from every story." They sat on her couch with their coffee, the city lights twinkling through her windows. The conversation flowed as easily as it had all week, but there was something different now, an awareness of being alone together, of possibilities hanging in the air like morning mist. "Sarah," Jake said softly, setting down his coffee cup. She turned to look at him, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. "Yes? I need to tell you something." "Okay." Jake seemed to struggle with how to begin. "That first night at Murphy's, when you asked what brought me there. Your meeting that went catastrophically?" "Yes, but it was more than that. I'd just discovered that people I trusted, people I thought cared about me, had been lying to me for months. Using me, actually." Sarah's heart clenched at the pain in his voice. "Jake, what happened?" "My family's company. It's complicated. There are people who think I'm not capable of running it, who want to see me fail. They've been sabotaging deals, spreading rumors, trying to turn the board against me." Jake ran his hands through his hair. "That meeting was supposed to be with investors who were going to help me expand the business. Instead, I walked into a room full of people who'd already been poisoned against me by lies. That's horrible. The worst part is that some of them were people I considered friends, people I'd grown up with, gone to school with. They were willing to destroy everything my grandfather built just to prove I didn't deserve it." Sarah reached for his hand. "You do deserve it, Jake. Anyone who spends 5 minutes with you can see that you're genuine and caring and—" "That's just it," Jake interrupted. "You see that because you don't know who I really am. You don't know about the money, about the expectations, about all the baggage that comes with being a Morrison." Something cold settled in Sarah's stomach. "What do you mean?" Jake looked at her with such intensity that she felt pinned in place. "My full name is Jacob Morrison, Morrison Industries. My grandfather didn't just leave me a workshop and some furniture restoration tools. He left me a company worth $800 million. Sarah stared at him, the words not quite processing. "What? I'm sorry, I should have told you from the beginning, but that night at Murphy's, you looked at me like I was just a person, not a bank account or a business opportunity or a stepping stone to something better. Just me, and I'd forgotten what that felt like." The coffee cup slipped from Sarah's suddenly nerveless fingers, hitting the hardwood floor with a crash that seemed to echo through the apartment. Coffee spread across the wood in a dark stain. $800 million, Sarah repeated faintly. "Sarah, please. You lied to me." The words came out as a whisper, then stronger. "You lied to me. I didn't lie, I just didn't tell you the whole truth." Sarah stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. The city lights that had seemed so beautiful moments before now looked harsh and artificial. Morrison Industries. The Morrison Industries that owns half the commercial real estate in downtown Chicago? That Morrison Industries? Yes. Oh, God. Sarah pressed her hands to her face. This is insane. This whole week has been insane. I thought... She laughed, but it sounded hollow even to her own ears. I thought you were just this amazing, down-to-earth guy who happened to walk into my life when I needed it most. But you're a billionaire. You're essentially royalty in this city. I'm the same person I was 5 minutes ago, Sarah. The same person who danced with you in Murphy's, who walked you to the train station, who spent every day this week falling for you. Sarah turned to face him, and Jake could see tears threatening in her eyes. Are you? Because the Jake I thought I knew wouldn't have let me pour my heart out about losing my job to someone who could buy and sell companies like Hartwell and Associates without checking his bank balance. That's not fair, isn't it? Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? I've been worrying about rent money while you've been... What? Slumming it with the working-class girl for entertainment? Jake stood up, his own emotions rising. You think this has been entertainment for me? You think I've been playing some kind of game? I don't know what to think anymore. They stared at each other across the small living room, the space between them feeling like a chasm. Jake's phone buzzed insistently from his pocket, and after a moment he pulled it out and glanced at the screen. I have to take this, he said quietly. It's my assistant. There's been some kind of crisis at the company. Of course there has. Jake answered the phone, and Sarah could hear a woman's panicked voice even though she couldn't make out the words. Jake's expression grew increasingly grim. I'll be right there, he said finally, then hung up. He looked at Sarah with something like desperation. There's been a fire at one of our warehouses. No one was hurt, but the damage is extensive and there are questions about insurance and... I'm sorry. I have to go deal with this. Then go. Sarah, please, can we talk about this tomorrow, when emotions aren't running so high? Sarah wrapped her arms around herself. I need time to think, Jake. This changes everything. It doesn't have to. It already has. Jake stood there for a moment longer as if he wanted to say something else. Instead, he headed for the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. For what it's worth, he said without turning around. Every moment I've spent with you has been the most real I've felt in years. The money doesn't change that. Then he was gone, leaving Sarah alone with spilled coffee and shattered assumptions. Sarah spent the weekend in a fog of confusion and hurt. She replayed every conversation she'd had with Jake, looking for clues she'd missed. The expensive clothes that had seemed casually nice suddenly looked designer. His familiarity with the cafe staff took on new meaning. He probably owned the building. Even his offer to buy her drinks that first night felt different now. She Googled Morrison Industries and immediately regretted it. Articles about Jake's grandfather, Malcolm Morrison, a self-made millionaire who'd built a real estate empire from nothing. Photos of Jake at charity galas and business functions, always impeccably dressed and surrounded by Chicago's elite. A recent Forbes article speculating about his ability to successfully run the company he'd inherited. The Jake in those photos looked like a stranger, polished, confident, untouchable, nothing like the man who danced with her in a dimly lit pub or walked her to the train station in the rain. On Sunday evening, Jake called. Sarah stared at her phone for a long moment before answering. Hi. Hi. How are you? Confused. Angry. Take your pick. Jake sighed. I handled this badly. I should have told you who I was from the beginning. Yes, you should have. Sarah. Can I see you? I need to explain. I've been doing research all weekend, Jake. Morrison Industries, your grandfather, you. I've seen the photos from charity galas and business magazines. I know exactly who you are now. Those photos don't tell the whole story, don't they? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like I've been having a relationship with someone who doesn't actually exist. The Jake Morrison I've been falling for is just one person you can choose to be when it's convenient. There was a long silence. When Jake spoke again, his voice was quiet. Is that really what you think? I don't know what to think anymore. Then think about this. Every conversation we've had, every laugh we've shared, every moment between us, that was real. My feelings for you are real. The fact that I have money in the bank doesn't change any of that. But it changes everything else. It changes the power dynamic between us. It changes what people will think. It changes what a future together would look like. What people will think. Sarah, since when do you care what people think? The question stung because it was fair. Since I realized that dating you would make me a target for every gossip column and society page in the city. Since I realized that people would assume I'm with you for your money. I would never think that. But everyone else would. Your friends, your business associates, the media. They'd all see me as some gold digger who got lucky. And honestly, part of me is wondering if that's exactly what I've become without realizing it. That's ridiculous. Is it? You swept into my life at my lowest moment, when I was vulnerable and unemployed and desperate for someone to make me feel worth something. Maybe subconsciously I was attracted to your confidence, your ability to make problems disappear, your obvious success. Stop. Jake's voice was sharp. Just stop. You're talking yourself into believing something that isn't true. How can you be so sure? Because I know you, Sarah. I know your heart. You're not capable of that kind of calculation. Maybe you don't know me as well as you think you do. Maybe neither of us knows the other person at all. Another long silence. When Jake spoke again, he sounded defeated. So what are you saying? That this is over? Sarah closed her eyes, feeling tears threaten again. I'm saying I need space. I need time to figure out who I am when I'm not caught up in some fairy tale romance that was never real to begin with. It was real, Sarah. It is real. I have to go, Jake. Sarah, wait. She hung up and immediately turned off her phone. Then she curled up on her couch and cried until she fell asleep. The next few weeks passed in a blur of job interviews and sleepless nights. Sarah threw herself into finding work with a desperation that bordered on manic, applying for positions she was overqualified for, and some she wasn't qualified for at all. Anything to keep her mind occupied, to drown out the voice in her head that kept replaying moments with Jake. She got the job at Meridian Marketing on a Thursday. It was a step down from her previous position, both in terms of responsibility and salary, but it was work. And it was honest work that didn't come with emotional complications. Her first day was a Monday, and Sarah arrived early, determined to make a good impression. Meridian occupied 2 floors of a renovated warehouse in the West Loop, all exposed brick and industrial fixtures that had been softened with plants and colorful artwork. Her supervisor, a woman named Lisa Chen, who shared her last name but no family connection, gave her a tour and introduced her to the team. We're a small outfit, Lisa explained as they walked through the open-plan office. But we punch above our weight. We focus on authentic storytelling for brands that want to connect with real people rather than just push products. Sarah felt a spark of genuine interest for the first time in weeks. That sounds exactly like what I want to be doing. Great. Your first project is actually pretty exciting. We just landed a major client, Morrison Industries. They're looking to rebrand and shift their image from corporate giant to community partner. It's going to require a complete overhaul of their messaging strategy. Sarah's blood turned to ice in her veins. Morrison Industries? You know them? Yes, I'm familiar with the company. Perfect. Then you'll understand the challenges we're facing. Their CEO is young, recently inherited the company from his grandfather, and there's been some negative publicity about his ability to run it effectively. Our job is to help people see the real person behind the headlines. Sarah managed to nod and smile and say all the right things, but inside she was screaming. Of all the companies in Chicago, of all the marketing firms Jake could have chosen, he'd somehow ended up working with hers. The universe apparently had a cruel sense of humor. That afternoon, Lisa called her into the conference room for a briefing on the Morrison account. The first step is research, Lisa explained, spreading files across the table. We need to understand not just the company's history and current challenges, but also who Jacob Morrison really is as a person. What makes him tick, what his values are, what story he wants to tell. Sarah stared at the photographs scattered across the table. There was Jake at a ribbon-cutting ceremony, Jake shaking hands with the mayor, Jake at what looked like a groundbreaking for affordable housing. In every photo, he looked polished and professional, but Sarah could see something else now, a certain stiffness around his eyes, as if he was playing a role. "We've scheduled an initial meeting with him for Wednesday," Lisa continued. "I'd like you to be there. Fresh eyes, you know. Sometimes an outside perspective can see things that those of us who've been in the industry too long miss." "I don't think that's a good idea," Sarah said quickly. "Why not?" Sarah scrambled for an explanation that wouldn't reveal the truth. I think I should get more familiar with the account first. Do some background research. Study the company's previous marketing efforts. I don't want to walk into that meeting unprepared." Lisa smiled approvingly. "That's exactly the kind of thoroughness I like to see." "Okay. You can observe the initial meeting via video conference and then dive into the research. But I'll want your insights within the week." Sarah nodded, already planning her resignation letter. That evening, she called her best friend Maya, a therapist who specialized in cutting through emotional bullshit with surgical precision. "Let me get this straight," Maya said after Sarah had explained the situation. "You're going to quit a job you just started in this economy because you might have to work on an account for a man you were dating for exactly 1 week? It's more complicated than that. Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it sounds like you're running away from your problems instead of dealing with them." "I'm not running away. I'm protecting myself." "From what? From having to see Jake again? From potentially helping his company succeed? Or from having to confront the fact that you might have overreacted to finding out he has money?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "He lied to me, Maya." "Did he, or did he just not volunteer information about his bank balance on the first date? Which, by the way, is pretty normal behavior. You don't understand? I understand that you're scared, and I understand that finding out someone you care about has a completely different life than you imagined is jarring. But Sarah, you've been miserable for 3 weeks. You clearly have feelings for this man. Maybe this is the universe giving you a chance to figure out if there's something worth salvaging. Or maybe it's the universe testing my sanity." Maya laughed. "Probably both, but you won't know unless you stop running." After hanging up, Sarah sat in her apartment and tried to imagine facing Jake across a conference table. The thought made her stomach churn, but Maya was right about one thing. She'd been miserable since their fight. She missed him in ways that surprised her. Missed not just the romance, but the friendship they'd built, the easy conversation and shared laughter. Maybe she owed it to herself to see this through, to find out if the connection they'd shared was real or just an illusion built on incomplete information. On Wednesday morning, Sarah sat in Meridian's smallest conference room, watching the initial client meeting via video conference. Jake appeared on the large monitor, looking every inch the successful CEO in his tailored navy suit and crisp white shirt. But Sarah could see the subtle signs of strain around his eyes, the way his smile didn't quite reach them. Lisa and her team asked the standard questions about goals and target demographics, and Jake answered with the kind of polished responses that sounded like they'd been crafted by a PR team. But when Lisa asked about his personal vision for the company, something in his demeanor shifted. "My grandfather built Morrison Industries on the principle that business should serve community," Jake said, and Sarah heard the Jake she'd known in Murphy's beneath the corporate speak. He never forgot where he came from, never lost sight of the fact that success means nothing if you're not lifting others up with you. "I want to get back to that foundation." "That's a beautiful sentiment," Lisa said. "But we'll need concrete examples of how that translates into action." Jake was quiet for a moment, and Sarah could see him debating how much to reveal. "We've been quietly funding housing initiatives in underserved neighborhoods for the past 2 years, partnering with local organizations to create affordable housing, job training programs, community centers. My grandfather always said the best charity is the kind people don't know about, but maybe it's time to be more transparent about our community involvement." Lisa made notes, clearly excited by the possibilities. This is exactly the kind of authentic storytelling that resonates with people. Can we get access to some of these programs, tour the facilities, interview the people you're helping? Of course, whatever you need. The meeting continued for another hour, but Sarah found herself focusing less on the business discussion and more on Jake's face. He looked tired, she realized, worn down in a way that had nothing to do with the early morning meeting. After the call ended, Lisa turned to the team with obvious enthusiasm. "This is going to be a career-defining campaign," she said. "Sarah, I want you to take point on the community outreach angle. Visit these sites, meet the people being impacted. Find the stories that will help people see Morrison Industries as more than just another corporate entity." "Lisa, I really think someone else would be better suited." "Nonsense. You have exactly the kind of authentic voice we need for this project. Besides, Morrison specifically requested that whoever works on this account have complete creative freedom. He wants people who will challenge him, push him to be better." Lisa smiled. "Something tells me you're exactly what this project needs." Sarah spent the rest of the week trying to figure out how to extract herself from the assignment without ruining her new job. But every alternative she came up with sounded flimsy, and she couldn't shake Maya's words about running from her problems. On Friday afternoon, she found herself standing outside the Morrison Industries headquarters in the Loop, clutching a folder of questions and trying to work up the courage to go inside. The building was a stunning example of modern architecture, all glass and steel reaching toward the sky, but somehow it managed to feel welcoming rather than imposing. The lobby was warm and inviting, with living walls of greenery and comfortable seating areas that suggested this was a place where people mattered. Sarah approached the reception desk, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I'm here to see Mr. Morrison," she told the receptionist, a friendly woman in her 50s. "I'm Sarah Chen from Meridian Marketing." "Of course, Mr. Morrison is expecting you. I'll let him know you're here." Sarah waited in one of the comfortable chairs, trying to calm her nerves. She'd rehearsed what she would say, how she would keep things professional and focused on the work. She would not think about dancing in Murphy's or kisses in the rain, or the way Jake's laugh had made her feel like she could conquer the world. "Sarah?" She looked up to find Jake standing near the reception desk, and her carefully prepared composure crumbled. He looked exactly the same and completely different all at once, still devastatingly handsome, still possessing that indefinable quality that had drawn her to him in the pub. But there was something guarded about him now, a wariness that hadn't been there before. "Hello, Jake. I wasn't expecting you to be the one handling our account. I wasn't expecting to be handling it either." They stood there for a moment, the lobby bustling around them while they existed in their own bubble of awkward tension. "Should we go up to my office?" Jake asked finally. Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. The elevator ride to the top floor was silent and eternal. Sarah focused on the floor numbers lighting up, acutely aware of Jake standing beside her. He smelled the same, that clean, warm scent that had haunted her dreams for weeks. Jake's office was not what Sarah had expected. Instead of the cold, imposing space she'd imagined, it was warm and personal. Photographs covered one wall, not the staged corporate shots she'd seen online, but candid pictures that told the story of a life. Jake with his grandfather in what looked like the workshop he'd described. Jake at various job sites wearing work clothes and a hard hat. Jake with groups of people Sarah didn't recognize but who all looked genuinely happy to be photographed with him. "Coffee?" Jake asked, gesturing toward a small sitting area with comfortable chairs and a coffee service. "That would be good." Jake busied himself with the coffee maker, and Sarah used the opportunity to study the rest of his office. Books filled built-in shelves along one wall, not just business texts but novels, biographies, books on architecture and urban planning. His desk was organized but not obsessively so, with stacks of papers that suggested actual work rather than just photo opportunities. "Here." Jake handed her a mug and settled into the chair across from her. "Thank you." They sat in silence for a moment, sipping coffee and not looking at each other. "How are you?" Jake asked finally. "I'm fine. Good. I got a job, obviously." "I heard. Lisa spoke very highly of you when I asked about the team working on our account." "You asked about me specifically." Jake met her eyes for the first time since she'd entered his office. I asked about everyone on the team, but yes, I was particularly interested in your background. Sarah felt heat rise in her cheeks. Jake, if you requested me for this project because of our history, I need to tell you that I don't think it's appropriate. I didn't request you, Jake interrupted. I didn't even know you were working at Meridian until Lisa mentioned your name, but when she did, I thought maybe it was a sign. A sign of what? That we might have a chance to finish the conversation we started. Sarah set down her coffee cup with slightly unsteady hands. We're here to discuss your marketing campaign, not our personal relationship. Are we? Because I've been thinking about what you said that night, about power dynamics and what people would think, and I realized you were probably right about some of it. Despite herself, Sarah was intrigued. What do you mean? Jake leaned forward, his expression earnest. I've spent the last few weeks trying to see this situation from your perspective, and I think I understand now why finding out about the money felt like such a betrayal. It wasn't just that I hadn't told you, it was that I took away your choice to decide whether it mattered to you. Sarah blinked, surprised by his insight. Yes, that's part of it. And I understand why the thought of being with me publicly feels overwhelming. The money does change things, whether we want it to or not. There would be scrutiny, assumptions, complications that most couples don't have to deal with. Jake, but here's what I need you to understand, Sarah. Every moment we spent together, every conversation, every feeling I shared with you, that was real. The truest I've ever been with another person. And I don't think the connection we had was about money or status or any of that external stuff. I think it was about two people who recognized something in each other. Sarah felt tears threatening and blinked them back. It doesn't matter if it was real. It's still complicated beyond belief. Most worthwhile things are complicated, not this complicated. Jake was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. What if we tried again? What? What if we started over? No secrets this time, no surprises, just two people getting to know each other with all the cards on the table. Sarah stared at him. You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. Look, we're going to be working together for the next few months whether we like it or not. This campaign is important to me. And based on what Lisa told me, it's important to your career too. So we have to find a way to coexist professionally. But beyond that what? Beyond that, I'd like to try to rebuild what we had. Without the lies of omission, without the misunderstandings. Just honesty and whatever this thing is between us. Sarah felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. I don't think I can do this, Jake. I don't think I'm strong enough to navigate your world. You're the strongest person I know. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you're brilliant and funny and kind. I know you see the best in people even when they disappoint you. I know you have the biggest heart of anyone I've ever met. Jake's voice grew soft. And I know that what we had together was the best thing that's happened to me in years, maybe ever. Sarah closed her eyes, fighting against the pull of his words. This is insane. Probably. But so was dancing in Murphy's on a Tuesday night in the rain. So was falling for someone I'd known for 3 hours. So was believing that I could be just Jake with you instead of Jacob Morrison, CEO. When Sarah opened her eyes, Jake was looking at her with such hope and vulnerability that it made her chest ache. If we did this, she said slowly, if we tried to start over, what would that look like? However you want it to look. We could take it slow, keep it private until you're comfortable with the attention that comes with being associated with me. We could figure out the professional boundaries together, whatever you need to feel safe. And if it doesn't work, if we try and it falls apart, then we'll deal with that professionally and maturely. But Sarah, what if it does work? What if we're giving up on something incredible because we're scared? Sarah sat back in her chair, her mind racing. Everything logical told her to walk away, to finish this project as quickly and professionally as possible, and then never see Jake Morrison again. But her heart was singing a different song, reminding her of laughter and connection, and the way it felt to be understood by someone who truly saw her. "I need time to think," she said finally. "Of course, take all the time you need." They spent the next hour discussing the marketing campaign, and Sarah was surprised by how easily they fell back into the natural rhythm of conversation they'd always shared. Jake was insightful about his company's challenges and refreshingly honest about his own limitations as a leader. He answered her questions thoughtfully and asked intelligent questions of his own about messaging and target audiences. "I'd like to start by visiting some of the community programs you mentioned," Sarah said as their meeting wound down. "Getting a first-hand look at the impact Morrison Industries is having beyond the corporate level. I can arrange that. Would you like me to come with you? Or would you prefer to go alone?" Sarah considered. Having Jake there would certainly provide valuable context, but it would also make it harder to maintain professional distance. "I think I should go alone first. Get unfiltered perspectives from the people you're helping." "That's smart. I'll have my assistant send you a list of contacts and addresses." They walked back to the elevator together, and Sarah found herself acutely aware of Jake's presence beside her. Nothing had been resolved between them, but something had shifted. The anger and hurt that had consumed her for weeks had mellowed into something more complicated, hope mixed with fear, longing tempered by caution. "Sarah," Jake said as they waited for the elevator. "Yes." "Whatever you decide about us, I want you to know that I'm grateful you're working on this project. Your insights today were exactly what we needed." The elevator arrived and Sarah stepped inside. As the doors began to close, she looked at Jake standing in the hallway and felt that familiar tug in her chest. "Jake?" "Yeah, I'm glad it's me too." The doors closed on his smile, and Sarah leaned against the back wall of the elevator, wondering what she was getting herself into. Over the next 2 weeks, Sarah threw herself into researching Morrison Industries' community programs. She visited housing developments in Pilsen and Austin, job training centers on the South Side, and a community center in Humboldt Park that provided after-school programs for local kids. What she found surprised her. The Morrison name was rarely prominent at these locations. No big signs or plaques advertising corporate generosity. Instead, Sarah discovered a network of quietly effective programs that were clearly designed to serve community needs rather than corporate image. The housing was affordable but well-built. The job training programs were comprehensive and led by people from the communities they served, and the community center was a hub of activity that felt organic rather than imposed from the outside. "Mr. Morrison comes by every few weeks," Maria Gonzalez, the director of the Humboldt Park Community Center, told Sarah during her visit. "Not for photo ops or anything like that. He just checks in, asks how things are going, listens to what we need. Last month, one of our after-school kids mentioned that they needed better computers for the coding program. 2 days later, we had a dozen new laptops delivered, no strings attached." "Has he always been involved this way?" Sarah asked. "For about 2 years now, ever since his grandfather passed away. You can tell it matters to him personally. You know, he's not just writing checks, he actually cares about the outcomes." Sarah heard similar stories at every location she visited. Jake wasn't just funding these programs, he was personally invested in their success. The people running them spoke about him with genuine warmth and respect, and it was clear that his involvement went far beyond corporate philanthropy. The more Sarah learned, the more she found herself reconsidering her assumptions about Jake and his world. The image she'd built of him as some kind of privileged billionaire playing at charity work began to crumble, replaced by a picture of someone who was genuinely trying to honor his grandfather's legacy while finding his own path as a leader. On a Thursday afternoon, she was interviewing residents at one of the housing developments when she saw a familiar figure walking across the courtyard. Jake was dressed casually in jeans and a Henley shirt, carrying what looked like a toolbox. He was accompanied by an older man Sarah didn't recognize, and they were heading toward one of the buildings with clear purpose. Sarah watched as Jake stopped to talk with some children playing in the courtyard, crouching down to their level and listening intently as a little girl showed him something she'd drawn. The interaction was natural and unhurried, not the kind of photo-op moment Sarah had been half expecting to witness. "That's Mr. Morrison," said Carmen, the woman Sarah was interviewing. "He comes by sometimes to help with maintenance stuff. Says he learned to fix things from his grandfather." "He does maintenance work?" Carmen laughed. "I know, right? You'd think a rich guy like that would just hire people, but he actually seems to enjoy it. Last month he spent 3 hours helping fix the playground equipment. Got his clothes all dirty and everything." Sarah felt something shift inside her chest as she watched Jake disappear into one of the buildings, toolbox in hand. This wasn't the action of someone trying to polish his image or fulfill some corporate obligation. This was personal. That evening, Jake called her. "How's the research going?" he asked. "It's been for enlightening." "Good enlightening or bad enlightening?" Sarah found herself smiling despite her intentions to keep things professional. "Good enlightening. You've built something really special with these programs, Jake. They're making a real difference in people's lives. Thank you. That means a lot, especially coming from you. I saw you there today at the housing development." There was a pause. "You were at Pilsen Apartments, interviewing residents. I saw you with the toolbox." Jake's laugh was slightly embarrassed. "Busted. The playground equipment needed some reinforcement and I had time between meetings. Most CEOs would have sent a maintenance crew. I'm not most CEOs." "No," Sarah said softly. "You're not." They talked for another hour about the campaign, but the conversation kept drifting into more personal territory. Jake told her about learning carpentry from his grandfather, about the satisfaction he found in fixing things with his own hands. Sarah found herself sharing stories from her visits to his programs, the people she'd met, and the hope she'd seen in their faces. "I have a confession," Jake said as their conversation was winding down. "What's that?" "I've been hoping you'd see what I see in these programs, not because it makes me look good, but because I wanted you to understand that the money, it's not about the money for me, it's about the responsibility that comes with it." Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "I'm beginning to understand that." "Does that change anything? Between us, I mean?" Sarah closed her eyes, feeling the last of her defenses crumbling. "I don't know, Jake. I'm still scared." "Of what?" "Of not being enough, of being judged, of losing myself in your world." "Sarah, you could never lose yourself. You're too strong for that. And as for being enough," Jake's voice grew tender, "you're everything. You're more than I ever dared to hope for." Sarah felt tears threatening again, but this time they weren't tears of anger or hurt. "Jake, I know you need more time. I'm not trying to pressure you. I just want you to know that every day we're not together feels like a day wasted." After they hung up, Sarah sat in her apartment and tried to imagine a future that included Jake Morrison in all his complicated glory. The thought still terrified her, but it also filled her with a hope she'd been afraid to acknowledge. The next few days brought a new development in their professional relationship. Morrison Industries was planning a major announcement about their community investment programs, and they wanted Meridian to help craft the messaging. Sarah found herself working closely with Jake and his team, spending long hours in conference rooms and strategy sessions. The collaboration was surprisingly smooth. Jake listened to Sarah's insights about authentic storytelling and community voice, while Sarah gained a deeper appreciation for the complex balancing act Jake faced as CEO. He had to answer to a board of directors, manage shareholder expectations, and navigate the politics of running a major corporation, all while trying to stay true to his values. "The board wants us to make a bigger deal of the philanthropic work," Jake explained during one of their planning sessions. "They think it will help counter some of the negative publicity about my leadership abilities." "But you don't want to turn community service into a PR campaign," Sarah observed. "Exactly. These programs exist to serve people, not to serve our image. If we start treating them as marketing tools, we lose everything that makes them meaningful." Sarah looked around the conference table at Jake's leadership team. All smart, dedicated people who clearly respected their CEO and believed in the company's mission. This wasn't the corporate Shark Tank she'd imagined. It was a group of professionals trying to balance profit with purpose. What if we approached it differently? Sarah suggested. Instead of promoting Morrison Industries as a charitable corporation, we tell stories about the communities themselves. Let the people you're helping be the heroes of their own narratives. Morrison Industries becomes the supporting player, not the star. Jake's face lit up. That's brilliant. It keeps the focus where it belongs while still demonstrating our commitment. As the campaign took shape over the following weeks, Sarah and Jake fell into an easy working rhythm that reminded her of their early conversations in Murphy's. The professional context provided a safe space for them to reconnect without the pressure of defining their personal relationship. Sarah began to see Jake in his element, leading meetings with quiet confidence, listening carefully to different perspectives before making decisions, treating everyone from janitors to board members with the same respect. The polished CEO she'd seen in those magazine photos was real, but he was just one facet of a much more complex person. One evening, they were working late on campaign materials when Jake suggested they take a break for dinner. "There's a great Thai place that delivers," he said. "Unless you need to get home." "Takeout sounds perfect." They ate in Jake's office, sitting on the floor around his coffee table like college students cramming for exams. The informality broke down some of the professional barriers they'd been maintaining, and their conversation drifted from work to more personal topics. "Can I ask you something?" Sarah said as they finished their pad thai. "Anything. What was it like, growing up with all this?" She gestured around the office, encompassing not just the space but everything it represented. Jake considered the question carefully. "Lonely, a lot of the time. My grandfather was amazing, but he was also building an empire. He worked constantly, and I learned early that business came first. I spent more time with nannies and tutors than with family. And is that why you're so hands-on with the community programs?" "Partly, but also because my grandfather taught me that wealth is a tool, not a trophy. He came from nothing, worked his way up from construction sites to boardrooms. He never forgot that success is meaningless if you're not lifting others up with you. He sounds like he was a remarkable man. He was, and he would have liked you." Their eyes met across the coffee table, and Sarah felt that familiar electric connection that had drawn her to Jake from the very beginning. But now it was deeper, built on understanding rather than just attraction. "Sarah," Jake said softly. "Yes?" "I know we agreed to take this slow, to focus on work and figure out the personal stuff later. But I need you to know that every day I spend with you, every conversation we have, just reinforces what I felt that first night at Murphy's. You're remarkable." Sarah's heart raced. "Jake, I'm not asking for anything. I just needed to say it." They looked at each other for a long moment, years of possibility hanging in the air between them. Finally, Sarah reached across the table and took Jake's hand. "I need to tell you something," she said. "Okay. I've been falling for you all over again, working with you these past few weeks, seeing who you really are in your element. It's made me realize that the man I met in Murphy's wasn't separate from the CEO or the philanthropist or any of the other parts of who you are. He was just you, without the walls up." Jake's thumb traced across her knuckles. "Where does that leave us?" "I don't know. I'm still scared of what being with you would mean for my life, for my career, for everything. But I'm more scared of spending the rest of my life wondering what we could have been." "So what do we do?" Sarah took a deep breath. "We try. Carefully, privately, one day at a time. We try." Jake's smile was radiant. "Are you sure?" Instead of answering with words, Sarah leaned across the coffee table and kissed him. It was soft and sweet and full of promise, tasting of pad thai and possibility. When they broke apart, Jake rested his forehead against hers. This time, no secrets, no surprises, just us. "Just us," Sarah agreed. 6 months later, Sarah stood in the ballroom of the Palmer House Hotel, watching Jake give a speech about Morrison Industries' expanded community investment programs. The campaign had been a massive success, not just in terms of public relations, but in actual community impact. The company had doubled their funding for housing initiatives and job training programs, and Jake had become a respected voice in conversations about corporate responsibility. Sarah wore a midnight blue dress that Jake had complimented 3 times before they left her apartment, and she'd finally stopped feeling self-conscious about the photographer who'd taken their picture on the red carpet. The attention was still overwhelming sometimes, but she'd learned to focus on what mattered, the work they were doing together, and the love they'd built one honest conversation at a time. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jake said from the podium, "I'd like to recognize someone who's been instrumental in helping Morrison Industries find its authentic voice. Sarah Chen of Meridian Marketing has taught us that the most powerful stories aren't about corporate success. They're about human connection and community transformation." The audience applauded, and Sarah felt her cheeks warm as Jake's eyes found hers across the room. After the ceremony, they walked along the lakefront, Sarah's heels in her hand and Jake's bow tie undone around his neck. "Good speech," Sarah said. "Very authentic." "I had a good teacher." They stopped at their favorite bench, the one where they'd had their first real conversation after deciding to start over. Lake Michigan stretched endlessly before them, reflecting the city lights like scattered stars. "Sarah," Jake said, turning to face her. "Yes?" "I have something to tell you." Sarah's heart skipped. After everything they'd been through, unexpected revelations still made her nervous. "What is it?" Jake reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I love you. I love your laugh and your brilliant mind, and the way you make me want to be better than I am. I love how you see the best in people, and how you're not impressed by anything except genuine kindness. I love that you dance with me in empty pubs and call me out when I'm being ridiculous, and make me remember what it feels like to be human." Sarah stared at the box, her heart hammering. "Jake." "I'm not asking you to marry me tonight," he said quickly. "I'm asking if you'll consider the possibility of forever with someone who promises to never stop trying to deserve you." Sarah looked at the man who'd walked into her life on the worst night she'd ever had, and somehow made everything better just by being exactly who he was. Complicated, yes. Challenging, absolutely. But real in all the ways that mattered. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to forever, yes to the ring, yes to all of it." Jake's smile was brighter than all the city lights combined as he slipped the ring onto her finger. Then he kissed her, right there on the lakefront with Chicago sparkling around them, and Sarah thought about fairy tales and second chances and the beautiful improbability of finding your person when you least expect it. "So," Jake said against her lips, "what did you think of this journey we've been on?" Sarah laughed, recognizing the callback to their first night together. "I think it's been the adventure of a lifetime." "Good," Jake said, "because this is just the beginning." As they walked home together, Sarah's engagement ring catching the streetlight and Jake's hand warm in hers, she realized that sometimes the most incredible stories are the ones that start with heartbreak and end with hope. Sometimes the person who seems too good to be true is exactly as real as they appear. And sometimes when you're brave enough to take a chance on love, the universe conspires to give you everything you never knew you needed. What did you think of Sarah's incredible journey from heartbreak to hope? I'd love to hear about your favorite moment from this story in the comments below. Have you ever had a chance encounter that changed your life? Share your thoughts and experiences. I love connecting with readers about these amazing tales of unexpected love. Don't forget to like this story if it touched your heart. Comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more incredible stories of love, second chances, and the magic that happens when 2 people find each other at exactly the right moment. More heartwarming tales are coming your way, so make sure you're subscribed to catch every new story. Thanks for joining me on Sarah and Jake's journey. Until next time.